Well, once again, it's time to grab your board, catch a wave, and ride the sales pipeline with your host, Matt Hines from Hines Marketing. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Paul. How we doing?
Oh, it's raining in California. You know, when it rains in California, everybody's depressed. It's like we all want to go home because it doesn't happen very often.
Doesn't happen very often. Yeah, I read that you got some flooding. It's going to be crazy down there.
Crazy.
You complain when there's a drought. You complain when it rains.
We complain. You know, we are weather snobs. You know, it's supposed to be It's supposed to be 76 with a light breeze coming off the ocean every single day here. So.
Well, I mean, so I think everybody has a little bit of that in them. Up here in Seattle, we are definitely weather snobs as well. It's been in the 20s, low 20s overnight, and lots of people complaining here, even though the days are beautiful. In the summer, when it gets above 90 degrees here, I mean, much of the country, you know, it gets hot and humid all the time.
Right.
My dad lives in Phoenix, and, there's always an over-under on, what day will it hit 100 for the first time.
Right.
Usually it's like late April, early May. When it hits 90 in Seattle, it is front page news. I mean, literally, you've got on the TV news, you've got a guy standing outside telling you, don't go outside.
Yeah, exactly.
Take water with you everywhere. Like, do not let the sun hit your skin. It's a little. I mean, I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm really not.
Well, not to take up your show here, but in California here, literally, people will call. I've had people. We have some other shows later today, and people are calling in saying, "Do I really have to come to the studio? Can I call this in today? Here, I don't want to do this live today because it's raining." People will call in sick to work. They won't show up for meetings just because it's raining. You know, because they figure, well, tomorrow it'll be fine. Let's just wait till tomorrow. So
wait till it doesn't rain. I mean, if in Seattle, if you wait till it doesn't rain, you're going to be waiting forever. Very quickly when I moved up here. All right, well, we could talk about the rain. We could talk about the weather all day long. I do have a reasonable segue on this. So when it comes to weather and predicting weather, it is quite complicated. I learned recently that predicting whether or not it's going to snow in certain situations is one of the hardest things meteorologists do, and it takes a lot of data. It takes understanding and interpreting that data in different ways, in complex ways. And today, we're going to be talking a lot about data, about analytics, about attribution as part of sales and marketing pipelines with a great guest today. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us on Sales Pipeline Radio. Really glad you're here. You can join us every Thursday live at 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. You can always catch us on the podcast. You can find us on the iTunes Store. You can find us on Google Play. Anywhere fine podcasts are sold or given away for free. So make sure you join us there, subscribe, give us a favorable review. We appreciate that and appreciate everyone that is listening live and on the recorded version here today. We cover all things related to the sales pipeline, marketing, sales. We blur those lines on a regular basis and feature great guests, great hosts. Sorry, didn't mean to say great guests, great authors, and people that are thinking and talking about new ways and new trends going on with the sales pipeline.
You do have great hosts, too. I have to interject.
I appreciate that. It wasn't meant to be a pat on the back. But very excited today to have with us Jeff Day, and I've known Jeff up here in Seattle for a long time. He has been a senior marketing executive at numerous companies in and around Seattle for a long time, and has put a particular focus and has a particular passion around the ideas of analytics and attribution. So I wanted to talk today a little about, with the increasing amount of information we have available, with the increasing level of data that's impacting and sort of interpreting different parts of the sales pipeline. How do we operationalize that and make sense of it so we're making better decisions moving forward? But first and foremost, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us on Sales Pipeline Radio today.
Thank you, Matt. Glad to be here. I thought you were going to make some segue into the Stormageddon predictions that we had a couple months back about a windstorm that was going to completely take out Seattle, and it became Storm of Nothing. And
it was, yeah.
Maybe you could parlay that into predictions and how to become a rainmaker for Sales Pipeline Radio.
Well, that's even a better segue than I had. Is, figuring out not only, we can always look in hindsight to say, well, that was bad and how did we miss it? But we're probably going to, that doesn't make us any more likely necessarily to miss it again. And I guess, when we think about sort of the data we have available, how to put that into some type of a report, I mean, that's almost the easy part, but are we looking at the right report? What does that report say? Does it accurately reflect the past? And maybe more importantly, does it help us make sense of the future and help us better guide what the future should look like? How do we think about this? How do we describe this? What problem are we talking about here? I think even just the language we use seems like it's still very much in flux.
Yeah, totally. And upon reflecting how we got here, right, marketers are in a world of big data right now. We can get data from everything, so many data sources. And when I started marketing, we had no data, or we were just on the verge of data, and things like marketing automation, and I don't think Google AdWords was even on the scene yet. And so in a fairly short period of time, we've gone from nothing to being absolutely overloaded with data, and the systems and the processes and just the general understanding, I don't think has caught up yet. And certainly I generally operate in the technology world, and talking to marketers not in that industry, they're farther behind. And so I think there's a lot we can do to help marketers in the high-tech and non-high-tech industry do a lot better by making decisions with data, understanding the performance of their marketing and their marketing channels through the data that they have available. But it is a kind of a complex problem to solve in this marketing world.
I think a lot of people are starting with the data and saying, how do I interpret the data? And I wonder if instead we should be starting with, what answers are we seeking? Like what questions do we need answers? What do we need to move forward? And so is there something we can give folks that helps them narrow in on, like what questions and therefore what answers do we need to be better moving forward?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that you have to start with the question, because that determines what data and how you not manipulate, but how you organize the metrics in order to look at the data in the right way. And I really approach this problem kind of looking at it a few ways. There's a lot of things I like to measure, a lot of metrics, a lot of analysis I like to do, but I have a framework that I break it into a few different columns to make it easier to think about. At one level, I think about, do we have the fundamental metrics that the business needs to understand the health of the business, right? And that's things like, and again, it's going to be different for different types of businesses and different industries, but it's like, what is our pipeline health? How much do we have? Do we have enough that, based on historical conversion rates, we'll be able to hit our forecasted numbers in the coming quarters, right? Do we have, what's our cost per customer acquisition, if that's a concern? That's a primary concern, for consumer-based, more transactional businesses, because if your cost of customer acquisition is greater than your customer value, your customer lifetime value, then you're not going to be a profitable business, right? So that's something that they look at very closely. So there are a number of very fundamental metrics like that. I think the next category is, within my function or within the different channels of my function, how do I use metrics to ensure that my efforts are either working or they're working optimally, right? So the great example for me in marketing is I look at all my different channels, online advertising, other online marketing, events, customer advocacy programs, and say, hey, I now want metrics, core metrics, KPIs in each of these areas to see if they're performing optimally, and then I can use those to say, okay, well, we're now performing better than we did last quarter or worse, and you can use those to sort of pull the levers and tweak the dials to make sure that you're always improving. And then the final category that I think about is, do we have the capabilities to answer the ad hoc questions that always come up in business, right? Which customer segment is most valuable to our organization? What programs are working more effectively than other programs? Can we use the data that we have to look at where new growth markets are? And those are all sort of ad hoc questions that you need both the right data and the right instruments to be able to go in and get the right answers.
Talking today on Sales Pipeline Radio with Jeff Day. You can find him on Twitter at Jeff W. Day. That's JEFFWDAY. And talking about analytics today and what's important and what questions to ask, what answers we're seeking. Is there data that's required as part of this? I mean, I'm assuming that people that are interested in pursuing this don't need to wait until they have access to all the data. But is there certain data that it's a need to have versus a nice to have? And then is there other data that you would prioritize as sort of the top tier optional sources of information, or does it depend on who you are, what you're doing, how you're measuring it?
Yeah, again, it totally depends. But again, it's a little bit of a layered or a peel the onion type approach. I'm a strong advocate for what you very quickly mentioned, which is to say, don't wait until you have all perfect data. Take the data that you have, figure out, one, if the data is good, because it's not always good. You can have bad data in there. But if it's good, what can we learn from this, and then what can we improve, and what other data sets do we need to really get to the answers to the questions that we want to answer, right? But again, if you're looking at things, this is Sales Pipeline Radio. One of the fundamental things, the first things that I always want to instrument very cleanly and very accurately is what is the health of my pipeline, right? From tip to tail, from the first marketing touch all the way down to close and hopefully beyond. What is the volume, both in dollars and the number of deals I'm doing? What's the conversion rate and what's the velocity of that pipeline? And so, to answer your question, what is data required? You need to know that, and most CRM or SFA solutions will help you, will give you that data for the sales pipeline. Most marketing automation solutions will give you data for the marketing side or the lead side of that pipeline. So those are a few just sort of fundamentals for a very fundamental metric that is relevant to sales pipeline.
So is this, what's the best way to think about this? I think a lot of companies just, when they think about their data, they're just like, okay, I just got my reports and dashboards, and they don't give a lot of thought to it. It strikes me that just thinking of this as analytics and even attribution is not really sufficient. How do we describe this in a way that better reflects its value to the business? It seems like something like performance management is moving in the right direction because it looks at what past performance and uses that to impact or predict or improve future performance. How do we describe this in a way that that organizations can start to rally around?
Yeah, it's a great question. Kind of shooting from the hip a little bit, right? I think about, so I started a company called Anota Software that was really focused on making analytics and a solution that was more turnkey for marketers so that they could answer some of these tougher questions. You brought up attribution, a very difficult problem to solve, but yet so important to understanding the value of the programs and the channels that you're working in, and just how are our customers using the marketing tools and the marketing efforts that we're doing to come to us, right? Most interactions, particularly if it's a complex sale, you're hitting that prospect 7-10 times with various marketing efforts, website, events, whatever it is, social media, before they actually engage a salesperson. It's really nice to be able to track those things. I used the term at the time called marketing performance management. I think it's a very powerful term to say, hey, this is not just, quote, analytics, which kind of, as you alluded, sounds like something without a benefit. But what we're really focusing on, how do we manage the performance of marketing through data, through performance metrics, through analytics for better performance for the organization. So I love that term. I think it's very, very appropriate.
Awesome. Well, we got to take a quick break. We'll be back with a lot more with Jeff Day talking about performance management, how to make sense of data and make it actionable and help it tell a story to improve your business. Give us a couple minutes. We'll be right back. This is Sales Pipeline Radio.
Whether you're producing a seminar series, users conference, lunch and learn, or exhibiting at a trade show, Validar has a solution. From capturing leads at trade shows to managing on-site registration, tracking session attendance, gathering information, and providing sponsors lead retrieval, we have a full suite of solutions for you. Since 2005, Validar has been turning corporate events and trade shows into better business. Call 888-784-2929 or visit us at validar.com.
In a world where the speed of innovation and change in B2B marketing has never been greater, the only thing bigger is the need for clarity, for a blueprint, for a guide to what's really working. And how about a way to apply it specifically today to increase sales pipeline growth, velocity, and most of all, conversion? That's what you'll find in the Modern Marketer's Field Guide. And amazingly, you can download it for free. HeinzMarketing.com, just like it sounds, HeinzMarketing. It encompasses the entire sales and marketing cycle, but in quick bursts with lots of specific, actionable ideas, strategies, tactics you can put to work right away, like today. The loaded table of contents helps you narrow in and tackle a problem. And it's something you can come back to over and over again as a reference guide. Why not download your free copy of the Modern Marketer's Field Guide? It's free. HeinzMarketing.com, just like it sounds. HEINZ Marketing.com. I don't know what that was. And now back to Matt and his guest.
Thank you very much, Paul. Well, if you like what you're hearing from Jeff and you want to be able to share this with some other folks in your organization, we will have a recording of this great episode today up on SalesPipelineRadio.com. You can also find all of our past episodes up there. We've been doing this for a little over a year now, so we've got, I think it's including breaks, close to 50 episodes of some great sales and marketing thought leaders and speakers covering a variety elements of the pipeline. So you can find that there. You can also subscribe. Obviously, the podcast on iTunes Store and Google Play. Coming up next week, we've got Sherry Johnston, who is the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at Radius. We're going to be talking about what she's doing to manage her pipeline heading into 2017 and best practices for working in the crucible, which I know our guest today, Jeff Jay, knows a lot about as well, helping to drive marketing and drive pipeline in a fast-growing, high-pressure, high-expectation business. Last Thursday of the month, we're going to have John Miller, who is the co-founder of Marketo and who is the CEO of Engagio. We're going to be talking about what it means to have an account orientation to your sales and marketing, going after the entire buying committee, not just one lead at a time. So John Miller there at the end of the month. Very excited to have him. But today we got a few more minutes here, thankfully, with Jeff Day, who has been a marketing leader in Seattle for a number of years, founded Indomo Software a number of years ago as well, is the founder of the Technology Marketing Leadership Council, and has really become, through his work, an expert on analytics, how do you leverage big data to interpret what's working in your business and where to take that forward. Jeff, as companies start to invest more or start to think more about investing, do you need a computer scientist now on your marketing team? Do you need an engineer that can leverage this data? Or can what are the limits of some of the native reporting and access you get from like a Salesforce.com or a marketing automation platform?
Yeah, I would love to have a data scientist on my team. I think there's so much you can do, and somebody who's really good at both getting into the data and using the tools to answer these questions is just really powerful. That said, there's a maturity model to this, and don't get the cart ahead of the horse by hiring a data scientist right out of the gate when you don't have the fundamentals covered. And what I mean by the fundamentals is, you can start with the tools that you have and the reporting capabilities that you have and really make those work, to the top of their limits, right? Go in and make sure that you're getting the answers that you want, that you have the dashboards and the reporting. And, I think about the Salesforce automation, the marketing automation platforms. If you're, heavily in mail, all the mail have their reporting capabilities. Social media has their reporting capabilities. Use all those tools to get the reports and the reporting capabilities that you want first. And then think about what you really want to do next. Because a data scientist is going to have the most value when they're able to set up data warehouses and they have BI tools, like our hometown Tableau or a Click or, a Microsoft Power BI or something like that at their disposal, which is a greater investment. A data scientist is a greater investment in personnel resources, databases, all that. I think it's a wonderful thing to do, and it's very powerful and will have a lot of value, but it is farther up the maturity curve, so make sure that you've taken those first steps first.
Yeah, speaking of first things first, where's the point of diminishing returns, either for getting started on this or, just overall? Again, I guess another way of saying it is, how much is too much? Is there value in focusing on fewer questions, fewer answers, and where is the value in sort of going beyond and sort of trying to get, more complete transparency and comprehension in what you're seeing?
Yeah, from what I've seen with my colleagues and at the various businesses I've been a part of, the too much doesn't come from necessarily having too much data or too much analytical capability. It comes from what I call a few different scenarios. One is getting wrapped around the axle and just looking at the same metrics or getting so deep in the data that you've sort of forgotten why you're doing it or what the question is that you're trying to answer, right? And that's really the second one that I was going to bring up is, and you brought it up right out of the gate, is make sure that you're actually answering questions, right? Too much can come from, say, wow, I've got all of this different reporting capabilities, but I've forgotten what questions are really important to me right now and why we're looking at these. And in that way, what I would do, and have done it at many of the businesses where I've been running marketing, is I set up a framework that says, hey, here's the tier of dashboards or core metrics, the KPIs that I want to share with my executive team. This is mostly about business health, right? And then there's another layer of metrics that I, as a marketing leader, want to look at. Again, it's just a small number, 3 to 5 for each of the main functional areas of marketing, right? So that's different channels. Maybe it's analyst relations, press relations, social media, as well as the classic demand generation. And then within each of those functions, I expect my leaders of those functions to be going deep into the metrics. For online advertising, right? They can look at click-through rate and cost and, volume, and you can go way, way, way deep into the metrics. But once you break it down, it helps you think, hey, what are the 3 key things that I want to be measuring that are really critical to understanding the performance of my business or my marketing function? And I think in having that framework, it gets you out of the what is too much mode, or am I not looking at the right things?
Well, what's beautiful to me about those questions is it really challenges the status quo of what many people think of as marketing. I think marketers, even good math marketers, good marketers that embrace revenue responsibility, are still facing the stereotype of the arts and crafts marketer, right? That is doing a lot of activity and not necessarily even focusing on revenue results, let alone measuring anything. So this is clearly a better way to sort of getting at better answers, and sort of following this path makes you far more accountable and far more valuable to the business. But ideally, I think it's not just marketing campaign performance management. Ideally, this is full funnel management. So is there any obstacle or any challenge in getting sales on board with this as well, to make sure that you're reporting on the entire funnel, not just the top half?
I would say there's probably there's 2 types of people in this world, to quote Clint Eastwood, right? There's 2 types of sales leaders, and there's sales leaders that understand data and want to look at the data and want to answer questions on the data, and there's the sales leaders that don't. And you're going to get a lot of friction and pushback from the sales leader that don't want to look at it. You should absolutely be looking at, conversion rate performance of the sales pipeline. You should be looking at how different segments within the sales pipeline work, and how well they perform. You should be going, do postmortems on individual deals as a qualitative way of looking at it, and then trying to build up a quantitative approach to that as well. I find resistance, kind of blanket resistance to looking at the data and having that sort of transparency to the performance of the sales leader and the sales organization, or not, right? So I think it's a very binary thing. I don't know. You've got a lot of experience in this as well. Is that what you find, Matt?
Yeah. It's what's nice about the data though is it's not like I think it's a lot harder if you've got a sales team that is reluctant to get them to embrace a sales enablement program, get them to embrace and leverage new content you're putting in front of them. If you have data coming out of the sales organization, the sales team isn't always the gate. You can get access to that information on the back end. You can start to report. The challenge comes in shining light on things that a sales team may not want light shown on.
Right.
And so, as much as it'd be fun to be able to say this is just about the data and seeing what it tells you, there is still a cultural impact to making sure the organization is ready for what the data is going to say. There is responsibility and accountability based on the answers you're getting that some of those organizations, including parts of marketing, that aren't used to seeing. So that's the part that I'm not worried about, but I think it's worth people being cognizant of. Just not everyone is comfortable with that full level of accountability and transparency.
Yep, I think that's exactly right. You're saying what I was trying to say in probably a better way. And it takes, and it's very true for marketing as well, right? There's definitely been times where I've gone into things whole hog, said this was going to solve the world's problems. The data showed that it didn't, and you had to swallow hard and say, great, we're not doing that anymore. I was wrong. Let's go try something else. But there's also, for us marketers, you can step into this discussion by saying, hey, let's make a small team. We're not questioning, your leadership ability or anything like that, but let's look at the data to see that we're making the right decisions for the business. And there is an element of how do we present this introspection into performance that would help sales leaders that are potentially resistant to it accept this new culture more willingly.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank our guest today, Jeff Day. It's been a fun conversation. These always go by way too fast. But if you want to learn more about Jeff, you can catch him on Twitter at Jeff W. Day. If you want to learn more about attribution, performance management, definitely check out more of our episodes on Sales Pipeline Radio. Get a replay of Jeff's conversation on salespipelineradio.com. Subscribe to our podcast. You get access there as well. And on behalf of Jeff, on behalf of Paul, I want to appreciate everyone for joining. Please join us again next week at 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. Look forward to catching you on the podcast. This is Matt Hines. This has been Sales Pipeline Radio.
You've been listening to Sales Pipeline Radio, brought to you by Matt Hines and Hines Marketing, right here on the Funnel Radio Network.